Today marks the third episode of Sundays with Ezshwan. It is my pleasure once again to interview Ezshwan Winding.
Thank you.
And I've chosen 5 paintings today to focus on based on technique and assemblage, or collage in this case, which I know can be very tricky and encaustic. I've seen other artists put things that are non-organic into encaustic. I, being a purist, don't think that's a good idea. However, because of all your teachings and all your practice, you have mastered the art of collage and encaustic. And can we please start with this painting on the left?
Yes, that is from an older series. I think there's only 2 of them left. And I had great fun with that because I was incorporating several techniques. I started with the milk paint base of white, and then over that I lightly drew in the figure, and then I put clear encaustic over that, and then carved in over the drawn lines, and incised with the warmer color of encaustic, then carefully scraped out with a razor blade. So that was the start of it. I did use oil glazes, and I incorporated very fine rice paper that I carefully drew on separately. I had it on a carrier paper, and I drew the fine pen. I drew all these little patterns, and then put a color on the board, and then put the rice paper with the drawing on it over that, fused it in. It was like just like that. It just goes right into it. It's a very thin rice paper, and it looks as if it's drawn right on the board. And then, of course, there's a piece of metal in there, which I carefully coated with encaustic and heated in there. There are rubbings from Josh paper also. Well, I built up a lot of texture with a hot pen. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of technique used to get that one painting.
And I also see some reflective elements. Is that silver leaf?
That is from the Josh paper. The Josh paper is from China, and it's used in ceremonies. I'm not quite sure if it's funerals or what it is, but it's burned. But I like to have it, it's on rice paper. It's an orange rice paper with squares of either silver or gold things in the middle, and you turn it over upside down onto the warm encaustic and rub it, and it will come out always in silver. So over the texture, I could rub on the Josh paper and get little elements of silver floating in the painting.
Now in this painting, I've noticed you've used organic elements. Are those leaves?
Yes, they're leaves that I picked up on a hike in Ezshwan, Oregon years ago. And of course, they were very, very dry, and I incorporated them over the encaustic painting. That was the last element I put in, along with a small collage in the right corner, which was a kind of a letter. But I started this board with white milk paint. I added oil glazes to stain the board like a stained canvas, added the clear encaustic, and of course the colored encaustic, again building up more texture, scraping into it. And lastly, I applied the dried leaves, like tumbling leaves coming down. And there's quite a bit of encaustic underneath each leaf, so it is a very firm, permanent base in the painting. This is the second one in that series that I mentioned in the earlier, and it's the same kind of technique, but I think you can see more clearly here where I have taken a fine pen and drawn on the rice paper. Now, of course, this is on a carrier page, so it does not go into the encaustic. And then, after I get the color on the encaustic, and it was still a little bit warm, I could place the rice paper in there, a little more clear over it, and fuse it in, and it just becomes part of the whole surface. Because the rice paper is so thin, there is just no disturbance in the surface. And of course, this was, again, incised. Here's a little bit of gold leaf. I've done some shellac burn down here, which I scraped away. There's lots of layers of the clear encaustic on here. And this little silver is from the Josh paper that I mentioned earlier, just rubbing that over the texture.
These 2 paintings from that series have a secessionist quality to it, something kind of Klimt-like.
Yes, they do, yes.
Now this painting is so unique. I've never seen anyone use encaustic this way. It's almost like it's three-dimensional.
It looks a bit like a quilt. It was just an experiment I did probably about 15 years ago, just building up and cutting and digging into it and making pattern. And it's one of a kind. It's not part of a series. I use it as an example in my classes sometimes of one of the many ways encaustic can be used.
So the fifth painting I've chosen today to highlight is the one behind you. And again, many techniques, I assume?
Yes. This I learned the hard way about putting metal into encaustic. I love copper. And these are pieces I picked up in Michoacan from a town that specializes in copper. And I didn't really think about it at the time, but of course copper is a heat conductor. So by putting it into the encaustic, it just carried the heat even more intensely, and of course it wouldn't stick on. So I learned a good glue, a heavy glue, can put it in there and then work over with the encaustic after the glue has dried. The stripes are encaustic. That is the clear encaustic that I mix with copper pigment. And here again are the incised lines, which I carved in, filled in with another color of encaustic, and carefully scraped out with a razor blade to get that effect and get the surface all the same.
Beautiful, Ezshwan.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.